Donald Trump just made the most aggressive financial demand in the history of North America. He stood in front of the cameras, completely ignored decades of alliance, and demanded $2.8 trillion from Canada. He called it a bill for decades of military protection. He called it a penalty for unfair trade. He gave an ultimatum. He tried to corner Canada. He thought he could break them. But Prime Minister Mark Carney didn't blink. Carney didn't scream. He didn't fire off a late-night post. He simply reached for the one lever Washington desperately hoped he would forget about. And now the consequences are spreading from the stock market to your local gas pump and straight into the Pentagon. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what changed. I'm going to show you who panicked first, and I'm going to explain why this $2.88 trillion threat might go down in history as the single biggest miscalculation of Trump's entire political life. Here's exactly what happened. Late this week, President Trump stepped up to a podium and dropped a bomb on the global economy. He demanded that Canada pay the United States $2.8 trillion. His argument was pure grievance. He claimed that Canada has been freeloading on American military defense under NORAD and NATO for 70 years. He claimed that Canada's trade surplus is actually theft from the American worker. He said, and I quote, "They owe us, and they are going to pay, or we cut them off completely." He thought it was the ultimate power play. He thought he was dealing with a weaker neighbor who would rush to Washington, bend the knee, and beg to keep the border open. Trump viewed Canada as a vassal state, a 51st state that just needed to be brought to heel. But Trump isn't dealing with a career politician who scares easily. He is dealing with Mark Carney. Mark Carney is a former central banker, a man who spent a decade at Goldman Sachs, a man who guided the Canadian economy through the 2008 financial crash, and then was actively recruited to guide the United Kingdom through the absolute chaos of Brexit. Carney understands markets better than almost anyone on earth. He understands leverage, and more importantly, he understands exactly where America's hidden weak points are. Sources claim the White House expected Ottawa to panic. They expected a frantic phone call from the Prime Minister's office asking for a discount. Instead, Washington got dial tone, and then they got a masterclass in economic warfare. Carney called a press conference in Ottawa. He walked out, looked directly into the cameras, and looked completely unbothered. He didn't offer a single dollar. He didn't even validate the $2.8 trillion number by repeating it. Instead, he announced an emergency national security review of Canada's critical energy and mineral export infrastructure. He didn't threaten. He just stated a fact. He reminded the world that a trade relationship goes two ways. And within minutes of those words leaving his mouth, the global financial markets realized what Donald Trump had entirely missed. If you want to understand why Washington is suddenly scrambling behind closed doors, you have to look at the receipts. Let's look at the actual numbers. The reality you are not being told on the evening news. Receipt number 1, the heavy crude chokehold. Donald Trump loves to talk about American energy independence. He tells his voters that the United States drills its own oil and doesn't need anyone else. But that independence is a complete myth. The United States relies heavily on Canada just to keep the lights on and the cars running. Right? Now, Canada supplies over 60% of all US crude oil imports. Let me repeat that. 60% every single day, approximately 4 million barrels of heavy Canadian crude flow south. They go directly into the Keystone Pipeline, the Enbridge mainline, and they feed massive refineries in the American Midwest and along the Gulf Coast. And here is the crucial detail Trump's advisors failed to explain to him. Those American refineries are accustomed to process heavy, sour Canadian crude. You cannot just swap it out. If Trump cuts off Canada, or if Carney throttles the pipelines, those refineries cannot just flip a switch and start using light sweet crude from Texas. It doesn't work like that chemically or mechanically. If Canadian oil stops, those Midwest refineries shut down completely. When Carney casually mentioned a review of energy export infrastructure, oil traders in New York instantly knew what that meant. The price of crude oil spiked. Midwest refineries began issuing emergency warnings to their investors. If Canada slows the flow by even 15%, gas prices in battleground states like Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania will jump by $1 a gallon in a matter of days. Receipt number 2, the critical minerals trap. Trump demanded $2.88 trillion to pay for the US military, but the US military literally cannot build its weapons without Canada. Look at uranium. The United States leads the world in nuclear energy, but America only holds about 1% of the global uranium supply. Canada has 10 times the reserves, and their uranium is 100 times more concentrated than the global average. Canada supplies 25% of the feedstock that powers American nuclear plants. Now look at nickel. Nickel is essential for defense. It is required to build jet engines for American fighter planes. It is required to build the Armor plating on U.S. Navy warships. The United States only has one active nickel mine located in northern Michigan. But here is the punchline. The United States does not have a single completed nickel refinery. Every ounce of nickel pulled out of that Michigan mine is shipped across the border to spur Canada to be refined. And then American defense contractors have to buy it back. If Carney imposes an export quota on critical minerals, the American defense supply chain grinds to an absolute halt. Receipt number 3. The power grid. It's not just oil and metal. It is the electricity running through the walls of American homes. Canada provides 85% of the electricity the United States imports. If you live in New York, Minnesota, or New England, your home, your hospitals, and your schools are largely powered by hydroelectricity flowing down from dams in Quebec and Ontario. Trump demanded a ransom, but Mark Carney controls the switches that physically power the American Northeast. If Canada imposes national security export quotas on electricity, something Carney's government is allegedly drafting right now, rolling blackouts in major U.S. cities become a mathematical certainty. Receipt number 4. The auto industry panic. Look at what the cameras caught on the trading floors the morning after Trump's demand. U.S. auto manufacturers absolutely panicked. General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis rely on a deeply integrated borderless supply chain. A single car part might cross the U.S.-Canada border 6 or 7 times before a vehicle is actually finished. You put a wall up. You demand $1 trillion ransom, and that Detroit assembly line freezes overnight. Wall Street analysts immediately downgraded U.S. auto stocks. Investors dumped shares. Trump tried to flex his muscles, but the spreadsheets don't lie. The United States bought roughly $400 billion in Canadian goods last year. Slapping massive tariffs or demanding impossible ransoms doesn't punish Canada. It instantly taxes the American consumer. It destroys American jobs. The receipts prove one absolute truth. Trump brought a megaphone to a knife fight, and Canada is holding the knife. This is exactly why Donald Trump is losing control of the narrative and why he is losing control of his own party. His entire political brand is built on dominance. He believes that if he shouts loud enough, if he threatens a big enough number, the other side will eventually fold. It is a 1980s real estate tactic. You bully the contractor, you threaten to walk away, and you wait for them to drop their price. But you cannot bully a sovereign nation that holds the keys to your own economy. You cannot evict a country. Trump is now trapped by his own tactics. He escalated with a massive impossible demand of $2.8 trillion as he put a number on the table that Canada physically could not and would not ever pay. He backed himself into a corner with his own ego. If he walks it back now, he looks weak to his base. He looks like a negotiator who blinked. But if he pushes forward, he triggers an energy crisis and a supply chain collapse that will crush the US economy right before the midterm elections. Look at the cause and effect playing out right now. Watch how fast it moves. He threatened the $2.88 trillion bill. Immediately, Canadian energy companies paused their cross-border investments. Then US supply chains got nervous. Logistics companies and trucking firms began hoarding inventory. Because of the uncertainty, the cost of commercial freight skyrocketed. And who pays for that? You do. The cost gets passed directly to the shelf at your local grocery store. Trump's leverage is backfiring in real time. He thought he was isolating Mark Carney. Instead, he isolated himself. Reports say that behind closed doors in the Oval Office, Trump's own economic advisors are quietly begging him to drop the $2.8 trillion demand. They are pulling up the data. They are showing him the Midwest refineries. They are showing him the aluminum imports, nearly $9 billion worth, that American aerospace companies rely on. They know that America is the vulnerable one in this specific equation. Trump is fundamentally reactive. He fires off geopolitical policy changes from his phone based on what he sees on cable news. He operates on instinct and anger. But the world doesn't work like that anymore. The world has adapted to him. The world responds with silence. The world looks for alternatives. And while Trump is shouting about military debts from the 1950s, global markets are rapidly pricing in the reality that the United States is no longer a stable, rational, or predictable trading partner. Investors hate unpredictability, and Trump is manufacturing it by the hour. He demanded obedience, but Canada chose options. Now look at how Mark Carney is playing this. The contrast is staggering. He doesn't fight like Trump fights. He doesn't throw tantrums on the internet. He uses systems, alliances, and cold, hard market realities. Carney's entire career has been about engineering stability out of chaos. When he was governor of the Bank of Canada, he saw the 2008 crash coming before almost anyone else. He cut interest rates drastically, completely insulating the Canadian banking system while American banks collapsed. He did the exact same thing in London, holding the British economy together when the Brexit vote sent markets into free fall. He knows exactly how to handle populists. Leaders who make impulsive threats. He doesn't take the bait. He turns their pressure into his leverage. While Trump was demanding money on television, what was Carney doing? He was quietly working the phones. Sources claim Carney has been accelerating trade discussions with the European Union, the United Kingdom, and the Indo-Pacific region. He is sending a very clear, very dangerous message to Washington. Canada has other buyers. Look at the statistics from just this past year. The US share of Canadian goods exports just fell to roughly 71%. That is the lowest share since the early 1980s. Canada is already decoupling. With the newly expanded Trans Mountain pipeline operating at full capacity, Canada can now bypass the United States entirely. They can load hundreds of thousands of barrels of heavy crude onto tankers on the Pacific coast and send them directly to Asia. Carney isn't just protecting Canadian sovereignty in a news cycle. He is fundamentally rewriting the power dynamic of the North American continent. He is composed. He is globally connected. When Mark Carney speaks at Davos, the world's most powerful institutional investors and sovereign wealth funds take notes. When Donald Trump speaks, they brace for impact and hedge their bets. Carney uses a central banking tactic called forward guidance. He tells the market exactly what he is going to do, and then he does it. It builds absolute credibility. Right now, his strategy is a long game. He is building a coalition of allies who are exhausted by Washington's extortion tactics. He is showing the rest of the world that you don't have to surrender to American bullying. You don't have to write a check just because the president yells at you. You just have to know where your leverage is and be willing to use it. Carney recently released Canada's new defense industrial strategy. It is a massive pivot. For decades, Canada just bought American military gear. Now Carney is retooling the Canadian economy to design and build its own defense tech at home. He is actively severing Canada's reliance on the Pentagon precisely because he knew a day like this would come. He saw Trump coming and he prepared the battlefield. So what does this actually mean for you? Even if you don't care about Canadian politics or you think this is just a dispute between politicians, Canada touches your life every single day. If this standoff continues, it is going to hit your wallet hard. We are talking about the price of gas when you fill up your car to go to work. We are talking about the cost of heating your home this winter. We are talking about the price of groceries at the supermarket because everything you buy is transported on trucks that run on diesel. And that diesel comes from crude oil that originates in Alberta. If Trump pushes this $288 trillion demand and Carney retaliates by throttling energy exports, the American consumer will absorb the entire shock. You will pay the ransom Trump is demanding just in the form of inflation. But zoom out for a second. The big implication here is about so much more than just money. History is shifting under our feet. For a century, the United States was the indispensable nation. It was the anchor of global stability, the one country you could always count on to keep the global trading system intact. But Trump's demand extorting a next-door ally for trillions of dollars signals the absolute end of that era. It shatters global trust forever. Think about it. If Washington will do this to its closest neighbor, its biggest trading partner, its most reliable military ally, what will it do to everyone else? What is stopping Trump from demanding $1 trillion from Japan or Germany or South Korea? Alliances are fraying. The global map is being aggressively redrawn. Carney didn't raise his voice, he raised the cost of ignoring Canada. And the visual of that, a calm, collected, highly educated prime minister standing firm while the American president rages and flails, is a symbol that is sticking. It is being studied right now by leaders from Berlin to Tokyo. Canada is writing the instruction manual on how to defeat Trump's America, and the rest of the world is downloading it. So, what happens next? This is the part of a geopolitical crisis where leaders usually calm it down, where diplomats meet in quiet, windowless rooms in Geneva and find a face-saving compromise. But Trump doesn't do calm, and Carney doesn't bluff. Here are the three scenarios playing out right now and how they will impact you. Scenario A, the most likely. Outcome, the quiet retreat. The US stock market starts to bleed heavily. Gas prices creep up 20 cents, then 50 cents. The auto industry lobbyists storm Capitol Hill. Trump's wealthiest donors step in and force him to pivot. To save face, Trump will claim a massive invisible victory. He will claim Canada made secret concessions. He will quietly drop the $2.8 trillion demand and the border goes back to normal. But the damage to American credibility is permanent. The world will know Trump folded. Scenario B, total escalation. Trump refuses to back down. His ego won't allow it. He slaps a 100% tariff on all Canadian goods and closes the border to commercial traffic. Carney instantly retaliates by invoking national security and cutting the oil pipelines. The Midwest refineries run dry in 72 hours. Auto plants in Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana shut down completely. We enter a localized economic depression. The US dollar plummets and the northern border becomes an active economic war zone. Scenario C, the unexpected reversal. Canada accelerates its pivot to Asia and Europe so fast that the US loses its privileged access to Canadian critical minerals, the exact minerals needed for the future of tech, electric vehicles, and defense. The Pentagon briefs Trump that without Canadian nickel and uranium, US national security is critically compromised. The US realizes it actually needs Canada more than Canada needs the US, and Washington is forced to officially and publicly retract the demand in a humiliating global spectacle. Whatever happens over the next few weeks, the uncertainty is incredibly dangerous and it is entirely real. Donald Trump tried to treat Canada like a failing Atlantic City casino. He thought he could bankrupt it, bully the management, and buy the pieces for pennies on the dollar. Mark Carney just showed him that Canada actually owns the bank. The $2.88 trillion demand was supposed to be a show of ultimate American strength. Instead, it exposed America's deepest, most critical economic vulnerabilities for the entire world to see. It showed every rival nation exactly where America's armor is thinnest. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Mark Carney is brilliantly protecting Canada's sovereignty and writing the playbook on how to handle bullies?